Hey there. So let's continue Chapter 1, Business Information Systems Strategy and Governance, and talk about Information System Strategy. Here you can see the lecture overview. First, we will extensively discuss on how to gain competitive advantage by means of information systems, or ICT, Information and Communication Technology. Next, we will zoom in on the concept of business strategy. We will do this by discussing Porter's competitive forces model, a model that has been suggested already a few decades ago, but which is still very relevant nowadays. We will then elaborate on how to gain competitive advantage using information systems. To do this, we will discuss the value chain model. Finally, to conclude this chapter, we will discuss how to link business strategy and information strategy, and we will do this by using Henderson and Venkatraman's strategic alignment model. Basically, the key question that we will try to answer throughout the entire chapter is how to create competitive advantage using information technology. If you look at information technology nowadays, you see various types of new developments. Think about wearables, think about sensors, think about drones, think about self-driving cars, and so on. Companies are continuously on the lookout towards those new technologies and see what they can do with them. And there's actually two ways that they can use those technologies in their business models. First, in a supportive way to support their current business operations, or they can also use them in a disruptive way to outline new types of business strategies. Both of these perspectives, the supportive perspective on IT and the disruptive perspective on IT, will be extensively elaborated on throughout this chapter. If you look at information technology nowadays, you will see that information technology has given rise to various types of new business models. Think about subscription-based businesses like Netflix. So what do you do on Netflix? You make a profile, you pay a certain amount with your credit card, and then you get access to various types of movies, documentaries, etc. All of this is digitally provided. The same goes for Spotify. Spotify is a service where you can make a profile, either paid or unpaid, and then you get access to all types of songs, old songs, recent songs, etc. Nor Netflix nor Spotify have a physical presence in the real life world. You cannot just walk out to any type of city and see a Netflix or Spotify store there. They are what we call pure play firms. A pure play firm is a firm which is only available online. Another type of business model, think about platforms. Platforms are basically market makers or brokers. They bring two parties together, buyers and suppliers. And think about Airbnb. The supplier is somebody that has a spare room, one or a few spare rooms available, and the buyer is a tourist who wants to go travel to a certain city and needs accommodation. Airbnb allows you to match both in a digital way. Think about Uber, another type of platform or broker or market maker. Somebody needs a taxi, that's the buyer, and the seller is somebody who has a car and has spare capacity available, right? If they have spare capacity available, they can just use that and earn some money by providing taxi services to those that need it. Another type of business model that IT has triggered is the business model of cutting out the middleman. Think about Dell, for example. Dell sells computers on the internet. Again, Dell is an example of what we call a pure play company. It's not present in the real life world. You cannot go on the street and find a Dell shop. You only find it online. Dell allows you online using state-of-the-art IT technology to configure your laptop and then get it delivered using logistics services. Think about HelloFresh, for example, where you can subscribe again and you can configure the meals and the meals are delivered to your home place. Dell cuts out the middleman because there's no longer laptop or PC retailing shops needed since Dell can now directly reach its customers. The same goes for HelloFresh. HelloFresh doesn't need restaurants in between, it just can directly reach the end consumers that are interested in it. Other types of business models you can think of as well, like Facebook. What's the business model behind Facebook? Facebook is one big network. It brings together various types of people that exchange messages, that post messages, that like messages, that share messages, and so on. Where does Facebook earn its money from? Well, it earns it from advertising. It's another example of a pure play firm. It's only available in the online world. Thanks to IT technology, Facebook can gain money. Same goes with Google, the most famous search engine in the world, and all of us are using this on a daily basis. Well, Google also earns money by means of advertising. They have an extensive suite of advertising products available, like Google AdWords, Google AdSense, etc., which allow it to gain money using um, these advertising services. Okay, so let's start by discussing business strategy first. And the way we're going to do this is by discussing Porter's five forces model, or Porter's five forces theory. And this theory has already been developed quite a few decades ago, but is still very relevant today, even in today's heavily digitalized world. And Porter started by zooming in and investigating the profitability of various types of American industries, as you can see listed to the right. The most profitable industries turned out to be security brokers and dealers, soft drinks, prepackaged software, etc. The least profitable industries turned out to be airlines, catalog mail, mail order houses, hotels, knitting mills, etc. And Porter wanted to understand what makes these industries really profitable or not profitable at all. What are the forces that play that impact the profitability of a specific type of industry? So starting from this key insight that the profitability is different across industries, Porter quickly found out the variability between those profitability numbers cannot only be attributed to internal competition and rivalry. We should not only look at the internal industry structure and look at who are our competitors. Porter actually took a broader perspective on this, and he said there are additional factors that needed to explain the variability in those profitability numbers. And he said we should try to investigate what are these factors that relate to the positioning of the firms in their external competitive environment. And by doing so, he basically identified various types of stakeholders, like suppliers. What's the relationship between the suppliers and my firm? Am I faced with powerful suppliers, or am I faced with not powerful suppliers? What's the relationship with my buyers? Am I faced with powerful buyers? A powerful buyer means that he or she is in a strong position to negotiate the relationship with your firm and as such weigh in on your profitability. Or am I faced with less powerful suppliers? If I'm faced with less powerful suppliers, then I as a firm, I am in charge and I can raise prices and so on, and my buyers will, will not be affected that much as they will stay with my firm, but by raising the prices, obviously, I can become more profitable. Another type of stakeholder, which is also very important, is the threat of new entrants, right? If you have a very unique product or service, then the threat of new entrants is a little bit more challenging, is a little bit more difficult. Whereas if you have a common product or service, then the threat of new entrants can be a really big threat and a dangerous threat. Do note that Porter's five forces model is a business model. So it's not IT focused. So in the next couple of minutes, as I will elaborate on Porter's five forces theory, I will not talk about information systems at all. Okay, here you can see Porter's five forces model. First, let's look at the circle at the center. This is a traditional view on how profitability within a particular type of industry was influenced, primarily by means of the rivalry amongst existing competitors. How much competition do I have with other parties in my industry? Am I an industry which is a type of monopoly. If I'm in a monopoly type of industry, that means I'm in power, I'm in charge, right? Because I'm the only firm in that industry. If I'm in an oligopoly, then things really are different, right? Because I have more firms, I have more competitors, and so on, which makes it more difficult for me to compete and which can weigh in on my profit. But besides looking at this rivalry amongst existing competitors, we should also look at the threat of new entrants. To what extent is it easy for new parties to set up a company and enter into an existing industry? I should also look at the bargaining power of buyers. To what extent do they have a lot of bargaining power or not? Can they easily switch from my company to another company or not? If a buyer can easily switch from my company to a competitor company, it means they have a lot of bargaining power because they can easily switch. If they cannot switch that easily because I have a unique product or service, it means that they don't have a lot of bargaining power. I, as a firm, have the bargaining power and I can raise prices and so on, or do whatever I like to increase my profitability. What's the threat of substitute products or services? Is the threat imminent or not really? Right? It will also impact my profitability. If I as a firm, if I'm continuously being exposed to a threat of substitute products or services, it will not be good for my profitability because I will have to be in a continuous lookout on how substitute products or services might enter the market and as such take some of my market share. What's the bargaining power of my suppliers? Am I faced with the problem of vendor lock-in? Let me illustrate that, or let me clarify that into somewhat more detail. Vendor lock-in means that I have one supplier and have a very tight relationship with that supplier, which makes it that if I want to switch suppliers, that for me as a company, it's very hard. Now, your supplier will know that, and your supplier can as such increase prices, can force you to an update, can force you to an upgrade, can force you to increase subscription prices, etc. And as such, your supplier will have a lot of power if you only have one. If you have multiple suppliers, or if you can choose between multiple suppliers, then of course your supplier will know that as well, and the bargaining power of your supplier will decrease. These are the 5 forces that basically tell you how value or profitability is determined within a particular type of industry. Let's clarify this a little bit further because this is really important. Threat of new entrants. What's the entry barrier? Think about the example of a pizza business versus a computer chip manufacturer. Say that I would ask you, would you be capable of setting up a new pizza business? Well, I'm sure that many students that are listening to this lecture have some creativity in mind, right? Everybody had pizza in their lives, at least I hope at some point. Um, and maybe there are some cooks amongst you who have a unique recipe for the dough, sourdough, whatever, or have a unique idea about how to put certain types of ingredients on the pizza, which gives it a kind of unique flavor, kind of unique taste. So for pizza business, the entry barrier is really low because you just have to buy a place or maybe even rent a place, come up with your own business concept of how you will cook your pizzas, how you will bake your pizzas, what kind of ingredients you make, and so on. And obviously, when you do so, you have to carefully think about how you will differentiate yourself from existing business restaurants. Why do you want customers to visit your restaurants and not your competitors? You need what we call a unique selling point. Another type of example could be setting up a new business that makes computer chips. So you're going to become a computer chip manufacturer. Obviously, this requires a lot more investment. So let's have a look at potential entry barriers there. For the pizza business, your capital costs are pretty low because what do you need? You need just a place where people can sit and have their pizza. You need a pizza oven and so on. And you need the ingredients. So the capital costs are pretty manageable. Whereas if you want to become a computer chip manufacturer, your capital costs will be a lot bigger. You will need a factory. You will need people working in there. You also need to make sure that if you produce computer chips that patent-wise everything is okay, right? So that you don't have any violation of existing patents and that you have also your unique selling point. What makes your computer chips unique? So the capital costs will be higher if you're a computer chip manufacturer. Also, the knowledge costs will be higher because, I mean, you have to have all this engineering knowledge available to make your computer chips in a unique way. Customer expectations are also quite high. I mean, if you look at the pizza business, obviously you will always want your customers to be happy, but if occasionally you have one or two customers that are unhappy because the pizza was overcooked, overbaked, whatever, it's not as bad as when you produce a whole batch of bad computer chips. A whole batch of bad computer chips can cost quite a lot of money when they end up being used in mission critical products, laptops, whatever type of computers that monitor mission critical applications. Network effects could also be a potential entry barrier because once you enter a business, you want to create a network effect. You want to invite a few people and you want to make sure that a few people buy your product or service and there's positive word of mouth that such that some of their friends will also so such that they can will convince some of their friends as well to buy your product and services and so on. So the network effects are also very important. Think about another example. Suppose you would set up a new social media platform. That means that you will be competing against Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. So there, the network effects will be a huge barrier because, I mean, it's almost impossible to compete against these giants. Switching costs. How easy is it for a customer to switch? For example, in the pizza business, it's really easy because there's plenty of pizza restaurants here in Leuven, and it's easy for a customer to say, hey, there's a new pizza business in town. We're going to try it out, right? This is a lot less evident if you're a computer chip manufacturer. Because if I'm, for example, HP or Dell or IBM, and I sell computers and I need I need computer chips, I'm not going to change my computer chip purchasing decision overnight. I'm not going to say, hey, there's a new computer chip manufacturer over there. Let's try them out. I'm not going to do that because the risk that accompanies that decision is a lot more substantial. Obviously, when you have a lower entry barrier, if in an industry there's a lower entry barrier, then it will decrease the profitability, right? Because it's easy to enter the market and to take part of the cake. Bargaining power of suppliers, right? Do I have many or few suppliers? Right? So if I'm a company and I can choose between many suppliers versus few suppliers, that's a whole different ballgame. Because if I only have a few suppliers, and if there's only a few suppliers in my business, then those suppliers can create what I referred to earlier on is a vendor lock-in effect. That means that there's a very tight relation between a supplier and your business. Your supplier will be aware of that. And obviously what they do is they will increase prices, they will force you to do upgrades, to buy new additional services and so on. So they will raise prices faster. They can also talk about the quality of the products that they're delivering. They could actually be tempted to decreasing the quality of the products or services that they delivering to cut their own costs because they know that you will not easily switch to another supplier given the tight relationship, given the vendor lock-in mechanism that you have. Another factor is the delivery schedules. If you have a supplier that knows that there's a very tight relationship with you as a firm, they could also say, look, delivery schedules, we're going to be a little bit more flexible on that because we know that you're not going to switch overnight and that you're too tight to us. Let's give an example. IBM, International Business Machines, was a very popular IT firm in the 80s of the previous century. And actually, IT at that moment was what Apple is nowadays. And they were dominating the market in terms of operating systems, in terms of laptops, in terms of hardware and software. And all of a sudden, Microsoft came up and it offered, first of all, MS-DOS and then Windows and so on. So its operating system of Microsoft became very popular amongst various types of hardware vendors, such as HP, such as Siemens, and so on. And at some point, IBM made the decision to change their operating system to Microsoft's operating system Windows. So by doing so, it created a very tight relationship between IBM and Microsoft, right? Because Microsoft was the sole provider of the operating system software to IBM. Knowing that, obviously, Microsoft was in charge, right? So they could raise prices, they could do whatever they want, and IBM became heavily dependent upon Microsoft. It almost led to the bankruptcy of IBM. IBM afterwards realized that and re-engineered their business towards other types of products and services so as to avoid bankruptcy. Think about the relationship between a supermarket and a milk farmer. In a supermarket, say Walmart or any type of supermarket, and supermarket sells milk. But obviously, milk is a product which is not very, which you cannot, as a farmer, differentiate enough. Milk is milk, right? So there's only one type of milk. So as a supermarket, I have low switching costs. I can very easily switch from one milk farmer to another milk farmer overnight. I can very easily do that, right? For milk farmers, this is a bad thing. That means that milk farmers have to carefully think about their position in that whole model. They're very vulnerable. Their bargaining power is really low because they know the supermarket can switch at any moment to another milk farmer that offers the same milk, because I told you milk is not differentiable, but at a lower price. So milk farmers don't have a lot of bargaining power. So what can they do to deal with that? Obviously, um, if you're weak as an individual, you try to group yourself. So milk farmers will try to group themselves in milk unions to protect themselves and say, look, within this milk union, we will agree on the same types of conditions, on the same types of prices or price ranges, etc., such that our bargaining power increases. So this bargaining power, whether it's with the company itself, or whether or with the supplier or with the buyer, as we will talk about also, is really important to understand the profitability of a firm. Higher bargaining power, obviously, of your suppliers means that your profitability decreases, as was the case in the IBM and Microsoft story. Let's now look also at the bargaining power of buyers. So I'm a company, I have my buyers, right? Um, Here we focus on the ability, how easy it is to attract and retain customers. Retaining customers is often referred to as customer retention. You want to retain your customers. You want to make sure that they cannot easily switch from one supplier to another because your product or service is unique and you have a unique position within your market. How easy is it also to attract new customers, new buyers, right? Network effects in these days play a very important role in there, or word of mouth. If your current customer base is satisfied, they might give you positive word of mouth, which will give you more sales and as such more profitability. If the bargaining power of the buyers is low, I can charge higher prices, which contributes to my own profitability. So the factors that I should consider here are the number of buyers and their price sensitivity. To what extent are they sensitive to the price, yes or no? And I hope they're not that sensitive as a firm, because if they're not very price sensitive, what I can do is I can raise my prices, and as such, my profitability. To what extent do my buyers have high switching costs? To what extent is it difficult for them to switch between one supplier and another? If it's very difficult, then I'm in a powerful position. If it's very easy, then I'm not in a powerful position, right? Um, Think about the milk farmers in the supermarket. If I'm a milk farmer, then the supermarket has really low switching costs. The supermarket can switch to another milk farmer quite easily, right? So the switching costs are very low for the supermarket. Think about the chip manufacturing example. If I'm a manufacturer of laptops or desktops, I'm working on an HP right now, and HP has certain types of chips that it uses. The switching cost for HP to switch from one type of chip to another type of chip are very high because it needs to integrate well in the system, it needs to be thoroughly studied, some of the manufacturing process steps will be affected, etc. What's really important to decrease the bargaining power of your buyers is to differentiate your product, to make sure that your product stands out, that it's different than what your competitors are offering, such that your buyers have no reason to switch and as such will not be tempted to leave you. Let's give the example of Apple. Apple has exceptionally high return on investments on their iPhones, right? So according to some of the numbers, it's about 40% return on their iPhones. This is incredibly high. And yet, despite the fact that the profit and return on investment for Apple is that high, it still remains in business. And we all have iPhones. Most of us have iPhones, have iPads, have all these um, Apple products. The bargaining power of buyers is in this setting is really low, right? So if our iPhone is broken, most of the times we will just go and buy a new one. We'll just see what type and so on. But Apple is really in a powerful position. It has tons of customers. Why is that? One of the reasons is that Apple is on a continuous lookout on how to differentiate itself from its competitors. And it does that by providing an ecosystem of products. It has the iCloud, the iWatch, the App Store, and so on, which are all tightly integrated. And by integrating all these different types of products, it basically is not offering a product anymore, but it's offering a solution. And that's what we oftentimes see in businesses. They no longer offer products or services, but they offer solutions, which consists out of an integrated suite of products or services so as to differentiate themselves from their competitors. Also, don't forget that in countries, especially in Asian countries, having an Apple product is a status symbol. So brand perception is really very important. And that's why many companies are also continuously on the lookout on what people say about their brands on social media, like Twitter, Facebook, and so on. You can do that using sentiment analysis, right? So brand perception as well. How do I want my brand to be perceived? Think about Ryanair, for example. Ryanair is the opposite to Apple. Apple wants to be perceived as a luxury brand. That's where its target market is. Ryanair just wants to provide cheap flights, right? So Ryanair has a totally different type of brand perception, and there's a business for that as well, as we all know, because I guess both you guys as well as me also regularly take Ryanair or took or soon take Ryanair flights, right? Once the lockdown is over. Um, Porter says that the higher power of businesses, buyers, decreases your profitability. That means that if your buyers have high power, they can very easily switch towards another supplier, which will obviously decrease your profitability. What's the threat of substitute products or services? And when we say threat of substitute products or services, we're predominantly looking at from firms from other industries, right? Are there firms from other types of industries that all of a sudden start to gain ground in our industry? Because what we see right now is we see that the borders between particular types of industries more and more start to disappear. Think about, you can see the example there, think about airlines versus collaborative video meeting solutions. Totally different types of industries, and yet they affect one another. Why do people book flights? You book flights for two reasons. Tourist flights, but many people also book flights to do a business trip, to have a meeting elsewhere in London, in San Francisco, and so on. But all of a sudden, what we see is that we have now a substitute product or service, collaborative video meeting solutions. Instead of having to travel to London or San Francisco, I can just do an online meeting, and that by doing that, I don't have to book a flight. So these collaborative video meeting solutions clearly impact the profitability of airlines. This is what we call the threat from firms from other industries. What I expect in the future as well, this is not that very much the case yet, but I expect that to happen, is a threat between banks or financial institution providers, even insurance providers, versus Google, Amazon, and Alibaba. Google, Amazon, Alibaba they're going to start offering banking products or insurance products I expect in the near future. They have lots of data available on you, so they will be able, obviously by respecting privacy and ethical guidelines, they will be able to perfectly understand your financial needs and tailor financial products such as loans, such as mortgages, such as car insurance, such as any type of insurance products to your needs. And I think at this very moment that banks are not anticipating that enough, right? I think that in the far future, not in the near, but in the far future, banking business will become under severe, the traditional way of doing banking will be heavily pressurized by these companies like Google, Amazon, and Alibaba. So the factors that we're talking about here are the number of alternative products or services. All of a sudden, we see somebody from another industry entering our industry and posing a threat. And again, this obviously comes with switching costs, right? What are the switching costs to switch from my bank to Google, right? With Google, I can do anything online. With banks, you can do most of the things you can do online. About 80 to 90% of the banking business is digitalized nowadays, but every now and then you still have to go and visit those a bank office to do something very specific. As Porter said, higher threat of substitute products or services will decrease your profitability. The circle in the plot of Porter's five forces model related to the competitors, right? So how many competitors do I have? Is my market a monopoly or do I operate in an oligopoly, right? That will affect if I'm operating in a monopoly, then it means that I'm very powerful. I can raise prices. I'm very powerful. Will I compete on price or not, right? Is there a continuous uh, price competition going on between my competitors or not? What are we doing with the total cake in the industry? Are we destructive in the sense that we will decrease prices and will actually decrease the size of the cake? Or do we try to maintain the cake as is and make sure that the profit is in some way fairly distributed amongst the various competitors in that particular type of industry? What's the industry growth rate? Is there an increase for demand? Is it stable? Or because of certain types of macroeconomic events, think about a pandemic like COVID, but think about a macroeconomic downturn and so on. How is this impacting my industry growth rate? Oftentimes, you will see that you have short-term focused executives. It's a really big problem. Like um, you oftentimes see that many businesses nowadays, they adopt a very short-term focus in their strategy. At university, uh, we teach you guys, and some of you will become executives later on, to always adopt a long-term focus. While in business settings, unfortunately, many people still adopt a narrow, short-term focus. Executives are being remunerated or they're being rewarded for short-term objectives. That means that oftentimes they will be tempted to lower the price, increase market share, such that will reflect good on them, such that they will be better rewarded. But obviously, this is not a good strategy in the long term because basically what you're doing then as an executive is you're decreasing the size of the cake instead of maintaining it or making it even bigger. Also, what's very important and which is affecting the rivalry amongst existing competitors are the exit costs. What are the losses incurred as a result of ceasing your operations, right? Sometimes these losses can get quite substantial, such that businesses that are somewhat that are unprofitable try to stay in business as long as possible because the exit costs are huge. If the exit costs are low, then they will quickly leave the business and so on, and the pie will have to be redistributed. So the exit costs, if there are low exit costs, they may be tempted to, once they see that there's no business to be gained anymore, to exit and as such redistribute the pie, versus when the exit costs are high, then obviously that will become less obvious. Quite obviously, higher rivalry amongst existing competitors decreases the profitability. Here you can see various types of business strategies differentiated along two dimensions. So at the x-axis, I have low cost, uniqueness. At the y-axis, I have market focus. Do I have a broad market focus or do I have a narrow market focus, right? Um, let's let's give some examples. Low cost, broad. Here you will typically have supermarkets, for example, or Ryanair. Ryanair. Ryanair is low cost, broad market focus. Narrow market differentiation strategy. Here you want your product to be unique and you're focusing towards a narrow market. Here you can have brands such as Rolex, such as Porsche, and so on. I also have other types of business strategies which are low cost and narrow and unique and broader. In fact, I have my own company, which I started a few years ago. It's an online digital course providing platform. It's called Blue Courses. And obviously, when I started this company, I was aware of Borders 5 Forces model, and I was thinking, what are my unique selling points, and what are my buyers, and what are my suppliers, and um, what is the risk of having substitute products or services, and the risk of new entrants, and so on. So we carefully thought about our business concept, and our business concept was the following: we're going to offer digital courses, online courses, which consist out of a set of pre-recorded videos on different types of topics. So you can see basic credit risk modeling, advanced credit risk modeling, machine learning essentials, and fraud analytics. All of these courses are taught by professors, PhDs, right? That was the first part of our business concept. So we needed specialists in the field. One of my core expertise areas is credit risk modeling. So I taught the courses, or I recorded the courses on credit risk modeling and machine learning and fraud analytics, as these are my core areas of expertise. So we only hired professors to teach the courses. Next, we also wanted to contribute to sustainability. We said, look, we're going to contribute 20% of our EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, to a good cause, and we carefully thought about it together with my co-founder, and we invested that in companies that clean up the oceans, such as Waste Free Oceans, Clean Up the Ocean, WWF, and so on. And that was our business concept. So let's have a look at the bargaining power of our buyers. So for our buyers, if they want a course, an online course offered by an expert in the field, right, by an expert who's known in that field, and if they want at the same time to also contribute to the environment, then we are their ideal partner. Let's have a look at the bargaining power of our suppliers. When we developed this course, this website, what did we need? What was our investment? Well, our capital cost was really low. The only thing we needed was to have an environment, a software platform where we can put our courses on and develop our courses and put them in development, and once they're ready, put them in production, right? And we have various types of suppliers to do that. So we have YouTube as one of our suppliers, and we have an online cloud provider as well, where our platform is hosted. So we had to thoroughly understand what were the risks, especially the risks of vendor lock-in, right? We carefully diagnosed the risks of vendor lock-in because we didn't want to be too tied to one particular type of supplier. So we opted various suppliers in terms of cloud providers, in terms of video storage platforms, such that we could mitigate that risk of vendor lock-in. Obviously, we are always faced with the threat of new entrants, right? We always are faced with that. Right now, we can still cope with that, but we are on the lookout for that. So that means that every now and then we do market studies, we look at what our competitors are doing, and so on. We do have a few competitors, like Coursera is one of our competitors, DataCamp is one of our competitors, Udemy is one of our competitors, and so on. So we regularly do market studies, like what are these guys doing, how are their prices being set, etc., to make sure that we're well positioned in our particular industry and that our unique selling points stay unique and that our buyers want to stay with us and are happy. So Porter's Five Forces model, if you're about to start a business, for us, when we started this business, we really used that model to understand how to start our Blue Courses business. Porter's Five Forces theory has a few advantages. It's generic, it's applicable to any company in any industry. So it was actually developed a few decades ago, but it's still applicable nowadays, even for online digitalized firms. It provides very detailed explanations for firm or industry profitability. It allows to understand the structure of firm and industry profitability by looking at those various things like the bargaining power of suppliers, the bargaining power of buyers, the threat of new entrants, the threat of substitute products or services, the internal rivalry within the industry, and so on. It also allows us to reason about an organization's strategic position with respect to its external environment, find its weaknesses, and see where it can be strengthened. Disadvantages. Porter's five forces model is descriptive. It's just descriptive. It's not prescriptive in any possible way. So it will not allow us to prescribe a future strategy. There are very few concrete guidelines on how to operationalize things, what to do to improve bargaining power of suppliers, buyers, and so on. So a key disadvantage of Porter's five forces theory is that it is descriptive. That's really important. It describes the forces, the strength of the forces, who is in a strong position, who is in a weak position, but it does not allow to understand or to give guidelines about how to change the bargaining power of suppliers or buyers or how to change that position. Okay, so let's now have a look at a second model. Remember, Porter's model is not information system specific. The value chain model will be more oriented towards IT or ICT, right? So you can use both terms interchangeably. The value chain model allows to better understand the impact of information technology on the strategy of the firm. And what it's going to do is it's going to first zoom in on the internal anatomy of a firm, the different units of a firm, the different parts of a firm. In other words, it's going to focus on the internal functioning of the firm first. And once we understand the internal functioning of the firm, from there onwards, it will zoom out and focus on the value chain of suppliers and customers because a firm never works in isolation. You have customers, you have suppliers, you have competitors, you have various types of stakeholders. So you work in a value system. And value throughout that entire system is being distributed by means of throughout various parties. And it's very important to understand this value system, where you are positioned, and how value is being distributed throughout that entire system. Because that way, we can understand how IT can contribute to creating competitive advantage. Really important, not only within the firm, but also throughout the value system. Because all of a sudden, IT will now also break its boundaries of being just an internal firm technology towards a value chain technology, which will allow us to streamline operations not only within the firm, but throughout the entire chain in which the firm is operating. Here you can see how you can look at the various activities that take place in a firm. So at the bottom, we have the primary activities, inbound logistics. There are goods or services that come in. They need to be inspected for quality. They need to be inspected for quantity. Do we have the order or the amount of goods or services that come in? Is it the order that we actually placed? Is it the amount we actually placed in the order? Operations, right? These could be manufacturing or transformations of raw materials into end products or into byproducts or into whatever. Then we have outbound logistics, which means that we're going to send the products to our customers. Obviously, we have marketing and sales, and then we have customer service follow-up, right? So in case a product was bad or was shipped to the wrong address and so on, or a customer is dissatisfied or files a complaint, all of this should be taken care of. And then we have the support activities. At the top, we have administrative coordination and support services, human resources management. It's really important, yeah, really important, because nowadays employees are as important to companies as customers. Traditionally, companies too much focused on customers, but nowadays you see that more and more we see firms adopting the perspective saying that besides customers being a key asset, also employees are considered a key asset. Technology development, R&D is really important, especially in technology intensive industries like chip manufacturing. You need to be on the continuous lookout for new technologies and how you can use those to gain competitive advantage. And then procurement of resources, all types of resources, right? Raw materials, but also people, because again, your labor force is an essential resource in your company and should be perfectly recruited, should be continuously skilled, and you should make sure that you retain all your good labor forces, right? So here you can see that the value chain, which is a sequence of activities through which inputs are transformed into more valuable outputs, which are then being sold on to your customers. You can see this is your value system. But as a company, you never operate in isolation. You operate in a value chain, right? Value system. So you will have suppliers, suppliers of raw materials, suppliers of services, and so on. So if I look at the value system of my Blue Courses website, or suppliers are YouTube, or suppliers are PayPal, and we have various types of cloud computing platforms that we use to host our website. Obviously, we have our customers. Again, if I look at my Blue Courses company, our customers are banks, our customers are consulting firms, our customers are retailers, online, offline retailers, and so on. So we have a various types of customers. Understanding your customers and particularly their customer needs are very important to optimize and streamline your internal um, value chain. Then we have the competitors. What's now really very important is that all of this has to be understood properly. You have to clearly understand how this is all interconnected. And from an IT perspective, it's really important how IT can be used to streamline all these processes in a very integrated and transparent way. Let's look at inbound logistics as the first example of a primary activity. So here we bring in the raw resources. That could be raw materials. If you have raw materials, there should be a quality and actually also a quantity control. Were they delivered in the right quantity? Were they delivered with the right quality? The receiving process. What's the receiving process? What's the registration process, right? All of this can be perfectly automated. What are the supply schedules? How often can my suppliers supply the raw materials? When should I order to make sure that I can keep my production, my manufacturing up and going? And again, IT can create various competitive advantages here. I can make use of an automated warehousing system, right? Orders come in, raw materials come in, they're being automatically scanned, and they're using state-of-the-art robot technology. They're being stored in the right places, and from there onwards, once needed, they're being brought to the right places. So I can make a fully automated warehouse design using IT information systems, using robots, using scanning devices, using wearables, etc. I can do automated quality control. I can make sure I have an IT system available that automatically samples a few of the raw materials that have been delivered and inspects them for the right quality. State-of-the-art technology allows you to do that. I can do automated packing and loading of trucks using robots, for example. And a company that did this was Walmart. Walmart is one of the biggest supermarkets in the world, and they wanted one of their strategic or business objectives was that they wanted to focus more on fresh and frozen groceries. It's really very important, like fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, etc. That is also one of their unique selling points. People go to Walmart because they know that the food is fresh, that there is availability of fresh fruits and vegetables and so on. But obviously, this for Walmart presents an immense logistics problem because food and vegetables tend to expire soon, right? So making sure that fresh food and vegetables are continuously being delivered to the various Walmart stores, which are spread throughout the US and other countries as well, is a key challenge. It's a key strategic challenge. So what they did was they developed a new warehousing center in Shafter in California, and using IT, they built an IT-enabled fresh and frozen grocery facility that stores and retrieves items and loads pallets automatically. How it does that is using scanning software, is using sensors and robots in a very innovative way. Using this new IT technology, they can move in and out 40% faster than than the existing warehouses that they were using. Now that's a lot. That's a lot. As I said, so they use robots to stack and load products more rapidly and efficiently, helping to maximize the available space on trucks that then go off or trundle off to the Walmart stores all over the country. You can read more if you want about this at the website indicated. Here you can see again that we can now understand Walmart's positioning and profitability in the industry. The threat of new entrants all of a sudden becomes more, I mean, less of a concern because a new entrant, if they want to deliver fresh grocery and frozen products to their customers, they need to have technology that is very similar to that one Walmart distribution center. So it's a huge investment that a new entrant has to make. So it will scare off new entrants and as such put Walmart in a stronger position. Bargaining power of buyers. If buyers want fresh products, they will go to Walmart. So um, the switching cost for buyers becomes higher because if they switch to another supermarket, all of a sudden they will have to, I mean, they can switch to another supermarket, but the products, the food and vegetables may not be that fresh, and they will have to pay a price for it. So the bargaining power of buyers also becomes less. The threat of substitute products or services also becomes less, right? Bargaining power of suppliers with this particular investment is maybe less of a relevant right here, but you can see depending upon the investment that you can make, some of the forces may change in this Porter's five forces model. Operations. Operations relate to making a product or service. Manufacturing, making a laptop by assembling it from its various parts. Making a car by assembling it from its various parts. Maintenance is also really very important. How can IT create competitive maintenance? Using computer-controlled machining systems. It's very important, right? Robots. Focus on operational efficiency or do predictive maintenance, for example. Um, so just one example, which is a little bit more concrete there, is using predictive analytics for maintenance. Analytics is something that we're going to talk about later on, but it allows you to predict. Using analytics, you can predict which parts of a machine are likely to drop out after a certain amount of time. You can then make sure that using the output or using the predictions of your models that you have these parts as backup stored in your facility such that as soon as a machine drops out, you can have it up and running again because you have the spare part already available. Predictive analytics is one example of how IT can create competitive advantage here. I once collaborated in my career with the US Marine Corps, right? And they were using predictive maintenance or predictive analytics. If they were sending out their aircraft carriers, and let's say they have an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, for example, then obviously these aircraft carriers, they're one huge ship, and one of these, they have various components, and all of a sudden there's a bomb that drops out, there's some devices that need to be, that drop out, that fail, that need to be changed, and so on. So these aircraft carriers, if they have to have new devices, if they have to have new components, and they have to fly them in from the US, it's quite expensive, especially when they're situated overseas. So what these aircraft carriers do, for example, is they use predictive analytics. They're going to predict which part of the aircraft carrier is about to get obsolete, is about to fail, such that they, in an intelligent way, can decide which spare parts they have to take along their trip so as to minimize the number of spare parts that has to be flown in from overseas, right? So predictive analytics for maintenance is one thing, is one way on how you can use IT to create competitive advantages to optimize your operations. Ryanair is another example. Ryanair, everything is digitalized. Everything is online. You log on to the website, your entire trip is perfectly digitally serviced. You can book also rental cars, whatever you want. You no longer have physical tickets, physical boarding passes. Everything is digitalized. That's why Ryanair can offer its flights at such low cost because it's an entirely digitalized firm. Some firms, like other types of airlines, still require you to use physical tickets, which is obviously, uh, this is obviously a lot more pricey for the firm, and which will also increase the price that they have to charge. Outbound logistics relate to delivering the product or service, right? Relate to finishing the goods, the order handling, and making sure that the product or service reaches its destination. So this relates to dispatch, delivery and invoicing. And what's also very important, if you talk about outbound logistics, is reverse logistics. Because what if you send a product or service to the wrong destination? How can you make sure if you send the newest laptop from Apple to a destination and it's the wrong destination, or it's not the laptop that the customer intended to purchase, then how you can make sure that this laptop is returned and that the appropriate one is being sent in a second step? All of this is part of outbound logistics. So it's also about reverse logistics. So here also you can study how IT creates competitive advantages, how I can have automated shipment scheduling systems. What about online point of sales? How can I fully automate that using IT? And a company which has been very good at that is Amazon, because Amazon has recently been filing a patent for anticipatory shipping. What does that mean? So I guess many of us have also already logged on to the Amazon website, and we buy products and services on Amazon. So you can buy books or other types of products, games or whatever. So Amazon makes a profile out of you, which is stores digitally, right? Um, and it uses that to give recommendations to you. So as soon as you log on to Amazon, based on your previous product purchases or service purchases, it's gonna give recommendations for you. And it will also predict what you're interested in. And it will predict what you're interested in, and it will do anticipatory shipping. It will ship products before you actually purchase them. It will say Bart is about to purchase a newest book on analytics, a newest book on World War One, World War Two, or Napoleon, because this is one I'm interested in history. So I buy a lot of books on history on Amazon. So if there's a new book on Napoleon, for example, or World War One or World War Two, Amazon can do anticipatory shipping and actually start shipping it, start activating its logistics before I ordered it. And they have an entire system which is based on predictive analytics to do that, which is what we call anticipatory shipping. In the US, they are already using drone shipping. Drones are an innovative IT application that allow you to ship not only in a few days, but in a few hours. So now Amazon is talking about hours of shipping in the US. So I order my product and you can have it within a few hours shipped in your backyard by means of a drone. Marketing and sales are another type of primary activity. So here we are talking about marketing a product or service. We're talking about customer management, order taking. We're talking about doing promotions to make sure that we can entice, that we can convince our customers for buying a product or service. We're also talking about sales analysis and market research, right? What are our customer needs? Or if customers complain about our products or services, what do they complain about? That's very important information to be aware of. Complaint analysis, needs analysis is really important. What are my customer needs? But complaint analysis is also very important, as it will allow you to better understand your customers' preferences, your customers' needs, and tailor your products or services, that's what we call customer management, towards the needs of your customers. Here we can again use IT to create a competitive advantage using computerized ordering systems. Think about an ordering system which allows you to fully digitally configure your order. Think about what takeaway.com does. So you can fully digitally configure your order. This is customer management. Takeaway allows you to fully configure your meal, your drinks, your starters if you need some, your hamburgers, allows you to perfectly fine-tune your hamburgers, etc. IT can also allow you to do targeted marketing. Using IT, I can understand what my customer needs are, but I can also identify prospects. I can say, look, this is a group of customers which are not in my customer portfolio now, but who might be interested in my product. So I'm going to do targeted advertising towards those customers to convince them to buy my product or service, and as such, do business with them. Netflix is one example of that, right? Netflix has its recommender system, right? So Netflix looks at the movies that you look at, right? So it investigates the movies you look at. It also, if you give, because on Netflix, you can give feedback, customer feedback, which is a very valuable piece of information for Netflix, as it will continuously analyze that and see what movies you appreciate, what movies you don't appreciate. And based upon that, it will make recommendations. So it will be on the continuous lookout for new movies and say, what are the movies that Bart likes? And this is not my Netflix print screen, by the way. Uh, but here you can see because a certain movie, because a certain customer watched a certain movie, what other movies he or she might be interested in. And here you can see it based on another movie. For Netflix, this recommender system is really very important business as it allows it to differentiate itself from its competitors because it has a very important key asset, which is its recommender system, which has been built using state-of-the-art analytics. Customer service is another type of primary activity. So here we look at customer support, like warranty, right? If a product turns out to be damaged, like maintenance, like education and training of our customers. If your product require a special way of using them, then it's very important that you provide education and training. This is often with software companies like um, I'm closely collaborating with a statistical software company called SAS, statistical analysis software. They continuously ship new products for doing analytics, but those come with the appropriate customer support in terms of education and training. So they have online trainings available that allow customers to educate themselves into how to use the products that SAS is shipping. Upgrades of products and services, and make sure that customers also successfully migrate from one version to an upgrade version. IT can create a competitive advantage here using CRM, customer relationship management systems. Booking.com is one such example. You can book trips on there. Again, it's going to make a profile. It provides all types of reviews of hotels, of all types of travel facilities, hotels, but also activities that you can undertake using and book using Booking.com. So that's one such example of a website or a company that really bets high on customer experience, on customer management, and so on. Support activities. So here we're looking at the upper level activities like administrative coordination and support services, human resource management, technology development, and procurement of resources. Also here, IT can create competitive advantages. Let's have a closer look. For administrative coordination and support services, we are looking at decision support systems, right, which allow us to make decisions at the tactical level, as we already explained, or collaborative workflow systems. Collaborative workflow systems are systems that facilitate the collaboration and coordination of activities between your various employees. It strongly improves the efficiency of your employees, right? Their output, the way they collaborate, the way they function, the way they work. For the employees themselves, there exist various types of human resource management IT solutions, like workflow planning systems, like who should work on what when. That's really important. Planning your workflow activities are very important um, because that will allow you to streamline the entire production process. So it's really important to see when which employee with what skill is available to do what type of activity, because that will improve the throughput of your value chain, of the value chain of your company, of all the various processes that need to swiftly connect to one another. Employees will typically also be provided access to an intranet which is dedicated to their needs, right? Which allows them to look at how many hours they worked, which will allow them to look at any holidays they are entitled to, which will allow them to look at any bonuses they may have gained, which will allow them to exchange any type of employee-specific information in an IT-supported, transparent way. HR analytics is one of the fields that I've been working on as well. That means that we're going to use analytics to better accommodate the needs of our workforce, of our employees. So we're going to try to understand if an employee is dissatisfied with his or her work, how come he or she is dissatisfied, and if we can promote him or her or change him or her to another business unit. All of that can be analyzed using analytics. We can also see using analytics whether employees are on the lookout for another job, for example. A typical signal, early warning signal, if an employee updates his or her LinkedIn profile, for example, that's an early warning system that the employee is on the lookout for another job. So you can have tools that automatically parse LinkedIn profiles and that look at when employees are changing their LinkedIn profile, and that could be a red alert like this employee might be considering to leave us, such that we have employee churn, right? Which is not what we want. Obviously, when doing HR analytics, it's what's really important is that you always respect privacy and ethical guidelines. That's why you see that labor unions, for example, are typically a little bit worried or skeptical about this whole field of HR analytics. Product and technology development or R&D, that's really important. I see far too often nowadays in the industry, I see companies coming up with a product, shipping it to their customers, and they have some market traction, so they have some market interest, but they ignore the important investment in research and development. And that's something that's really important. As a company, when you're in a tech intensive, technology intensive sector, it's really important to continuously invest in research and development using computer aided designs, using a partner product development extranet, for example, so that you can perfectly align your products, especially when the product comes with a lot of technical specifications. Um, Think about cars, for example. Cars come with very technical specifications. So if a car all of a sudden wants to use a new type of audio system, wants to use a new type of GPS, wants to use a new type of display system or whatever type of system, it needs to closely align with its suppliers to make sure that the designs of the product are fully aligned and can fully integrate with one another to build a successful car. Procurement, how are we going to do the procurement? Am I going to make use of an e-commerce web portal? That could be very easy to facilitate procurement. I can use IT to set up automated reverse auctions, right? Um, a reverse auction, it's a type of auction where you say, look, I have need for product A, and various suppliers can then supply all kinds of conditions at which they can supply product A. They can say, I can supply product A at a price of this, within a delivery term of this, and with a quality guarantee of this. All of this can be automated such that you can set up a reverse auction system that inspects all these auctions, all these price bids, these quality bids, these delivery bids that are being given or provided to you by your suppliers, and that you can use an IT system then to automatically analyze which is the most favorable bid based upon your own needs. The key message is that all these examples show that organizations can create and sustain competitive advantage through the entire value chain, value system, and that the company should not focus on their internal functioning as such, but should have a broader, wider focus throughout the entire value chain. And what's really important is the alignment between business and IT. Business and IT should not be seen as separate things. They shouldn't be blended into each other. They should be fully integrated. IT should no longer be exclusively seen as a supportive technology, but using IT, we can also create, outline new business strategies. Think about the Walmart example where they had that automated warehouse using robots, using sensors to make sure that now using this new IT technology, Walmart can really say, look, we can further strengthen our business strategy and say we can deliver fresh uh, uh, um, fruits and products, groceries to our customers in a more efficient, in a better way. Note that there exist different strategic options for aligning business and IT. And that's why we need a third type of model. And here you can see that all of a sudden, ICT strategy, you can see that popping up. And that's the model of Henderson and Van Ketteraman. You can also see it also dates from the previous century. It's about more than 27 years old, which is quite old, but still, it very much is relevant nowadays. So here we have our business strategy. And our business strategy is typically materialized, implemented by means of operational infrastructure and processes. And we need strategic fit between both, right? So this is the external part, the strategy, and this is the internal part. The internal part actually tells us how our external vision, how our external strategy is operationalized at the operational level. So there should be strategic fit between a business strategy and the internal or operational part. But next to that, we have the ICT strategy. The ICT strategy outlines our vision about how new ICT technology can be used in a strategic way. Think about drones, think about self-driving cars, think about wearables, think about sensors. For even some firms, think about e-business, because even nowadays, not all firms have migrated to the internet to e-business yet. So for some firms, e-business could be part of their ICT strategy, which will obviously also have impact on their business strategy, right? Because all of a sudden, you no longer start to sell only in physical stores, but also online. So ICT strategy is about how to leverage new ICT technology in a strategic way to offer you new opportunities. Here, these are the ICT infrastructure and processes. So this is the IT implementation, right? The processes that can realize your ICT strategy, but also help you realize your operational infrastructure and processes. So you see that we have various types of fit or alignment here. We have a fit between our business strategy and our operational infrastructure and processes. That's what we call strategic fit, or between ICT strategy and ICT infrastructure and processes. But we also have horizontal fits or horizontal alignments, which is what we call functional integration. Ideally, all of it should be integrated. One thing that Henderson and Van Katterman added in this model is ICT strategy. So that's very novel when we compare it to the previous model, Porter's model, and the value chain model. So let's elaborate a bit further. The business strategy addresses both the external and internal domains. External means the business environment of the company. What are the needs of my customers? That's really important. What about my suppliers, right? How many suppliers do I have? What is my supplier business looking at? And how is the relationship with my suppliers? How much bargaining power do I have? So that's the external outlook. How do I differentiate myself from my competitors? Do I have a unique product like Apple, right, who creates an entire community? Or do I differentiate in other ways? Like with Blue Courses, we differentiate because we give courses provided by experts in the field, and we have our sustainability purpose that we strongly believe in. And then internal, I have my administrative structure and I have the design of the various business processes to support my business strategy. And there should be alignment between both, right? Because my internal um, uh, business processes should be perfectly aligned to my external environment, to the way I operate in my ecosystem between my suppliers, customers, and various types of other stakeholders. So there should be a fit or an alignment between the external and internal environment in order to maximize performance. That all relates to my business strategy, and the implementation should be aligned with the processes. The IT strategy should also address both external and internal domains. External means how is the firm positioned in the IT marketplace, right? Just think about the very simple example of going online, going digital, making sure you have an e-business website available versus not going online. A bricks and mortar company is a company that is only available or only present in the physical world. Yeah? That could be your local butcher, for example, or your local bakery, for example. A pure play company is a company that is only available in the online world. That's Amazon, that's Google, and Facebook. A clicks and mortar company is a company, and these is the majority of companies nowadays, that have some presence in the offline world, but their primary business is done in the online world. Think about Zalando.com, for example, right? So that's an example. So how is my firm position in the IT marketplace? Do you have an e-business front end or not? Internal, how is my IT infrastructure, how can it be managed and configured such that it optimally supports my business processes and as such my business strategy? IT should no longer be seen as a support function. So IT can now be what we call in management literature a disruptive enabler. It can have an effect on your business strategy. All of a sudden, IT, because of emerging IT technologies, it could be that you start outlining IT strategies which impact your business strategies as well. So my internal and external domain should be aligned for deriving benefits from IT investments. Functional integration is also very important. So the strategic integration means that we integrate our IT strategy and business strategy. What is the impact of IT strategy on business? Our IT strategy says that we will invest in drones. What's the impact on the business? Well, let's think about it. I'm an insurance provider. I gave the example, I think, already earlier on. Can I, as an insurance provider, use drones in my business? At first sight, you would say no. But if upon clearer inspection, imagine, and this is the example I already gave, if there's a storm that has damaged certain types of real estate properties, the roofs, whatever, what you sometimes see is that people whose property has not been damaged by the storm intentionally damage their property and then say to the business, and then say to the insurance provider, the damage was done by the storm, such that using the money they get from the insurance provider, they can easily buy themselves a new roof, a new type of garden house, whatever. So that's a type of fraud. Using drones, we can now detect that, or insurance providers can detect that, because as the storm has taken place, they can send out an army of drones to take pictures of certain types of heavily damaged regions, real estate properties, and then use that to make sure that there's no fraud happening otherwise afterwards, that there's no people that deliberately inflict damage onto their real estate properties and as such conduct insurance fraud. So here you can see that IT strategy can have an impact on your business. If we go, for example, if you're a company that is only available in the physical world, and all of a sudden you say, I want to go e-business, then that will have an impact on your business strategy, right? Because all of a sudden, if you go online, it could be that you need to understand what customers prefer online shopping versus what customers prefer shopping in the physical world. What is the impact of the business strategy on IT? If you have a new type of business strategy, or if you want to cut costs and so on, how will that impact your IT? Which IT investments can help us contribute to that purpose? Operational integration means that the organizational infrastructure and processes, and IS infrastructure and processes should be supported. The IS infrastructure and processes should support your organizational infrastructure and processes. So there should be coherence between your organization requirements and expectations and what IS can deliver. Obviously, unfortunately, I should say this comes with problems, right? Because getting this all aligned and getting a good fit between all these different types of things, I mean, there's some potential problems, like top managers like the CEO, chief executive officer, the CIO, the chief information officer, or the chief data officer, or whatever type of officer, the chief risk officer, they may be ill-informed. They may be ill-informed about new types of IT developments. And when you're ill-informed about something, then you're not keen on using that. We've seen that far too often in my own consulting and research experience with analytics, for example. Analytics is also a strategic disruptor. It gives you all types of new possibilities to analyze your customers, to understand their needs, and to tailor your product or service to their needs. But because managers are oftentimes ill-informed, they are quite reluctant to use analytics to steer their strategic decisions, which is very unfortunate. So that's why that's the first potential problem. They're reluctant to be involved, and they like to have to keep running their business processes according to the old ways, etc. Also, end users may be reluctant to use information technology, right? If you have more seasoned end users, oftentimes we will see that these people have been working with a particular type of IT application for many years. They know the application inside out, and they're very reluctant to use new applications that offer the company strategic advantages. Or sometimes you can also see the opposite. You can see that certain types of end users are impatient to use IT because they're dying to use new IT technology. And sometimes can also be a risk because being too impatient can put too much pressure on the deployment of new types of IT technology, which is not mature enough yet to be put into production. The IT professional on his or her side can then lack a strategic view because he or she is very blinded by this new type of amazing IT technology, but lacks any strategic dangers that may come with it. The thing is, we have the strategic alignment model, so we have business strategy, ICT strategy, and then at the next level, we have operational infrastructure and processes. Um, Then we have ICT infrastructure and processes. Should all of this be perfectly aligned? Should we have those strategic fit perfectly put in place? And should we have the functional fit perfectly in place? So where do we start? How to proceed? Well, in the Henderson and Van Katram paper, they said, look, it's best to focus on 2 or 3 alignments, right? And make sure that you excel in those 2 or 3 alignments. They call that alignment perspectives, right? So you should not make sure, well, you can, but it's not strictly required that those 4 arrows are perfectly operationalized or perfectly uh, materialized. It's perfectly fine if you focus on 2 or 3 of these. Like in this setting, we start from a business strategy. This setting is what we call strategic execution, a very important term. We start from a business strategy. From there onwards, we define our operational infrastructure and processes to optimally support and realize our business strategy. And from there onwards, we move to our ICT infrastructure and processes. This is typically what airline companies do, right? They use business strategies, they want to provide cheap flights, or they want to provide timely flights or whatever type of key performance indicators they are pursuing in their business strategy. From there onwards, work towards their operational infrastructure and processes, and from there onwards, define their ICT infrastructure and processes. So here, ICT does not work as a strategic disruptor, but it just works as an enabler. IT is used in a support way. We can also have a business strategy and then use an IT strategy and then operationalize that using IT and ICT infrastructure and processes. Walmart was the example. This is what we call technology transformation. The business strategy of Walmart was that they want to focus more on delivering fresh groceries and frozen products uh, to their local Walmart stores. That they considered to be a key strategic objective. That led to a new type of ICT strategy because they built this new warehouse, right? So they built this new warehouse that was fully automated. It was embedded with all kinds of state-of-the-art IT technology like robots, like sensors, etc. And that then needed to be operationalized using ICT infrastructure and processes. This is what we call technology transformation. Then we have competitive potential, which is a third type. We start from an ICT strategy. From there, we define our business strategy, and that we're going to then operationalize or put into operational infrastructure and processes. This is what Google, Facebook, and Amazon does. What is Google actually? It has an ICT strategy. It's a search engine. That's its ICT strategy, search engine. From there onwards, it builds its business strategy because it realizes, um, given that our search engine works so well and is so popular amongst our customers, we can start gaining money through advertising. So business advertising is part of its business strategy, which is then put into operational infrastructure and processes. Facebook, same story. ICT strategy. We build a network or a community of Facebook users that post messages on there, that share posts, that can like, that can share, uh, that can actually offer all kinds of, that can exchange all kinds of information. That then led to a business strategy, again, advertising, which had to be operationalized using operational infrastructure and processes. Same goes with Amazon. And finally, service level. This is typically where we have the IT companies like Microsoft, IBM, and SAP. And you can think of other ones as well, right? HP, whatever type of ICT strategy. They have ICT, they start from an ICT strategy, put that into ICT infrastructure and processes, and then operationalize that into various types of operation infrastructure and processes that can then be used by various types of customers of Microsoft, IBM, and SAP. Like SAP is a provider of ERP software, as we already discussed, enterprise resource planning software. So it has processes for purchasing, for marketing, for HR, and so on. All of these can then be nicely used and operationalized by the customers of SAP. Same goes for IBM and Microsoft. We hereby conclude this chapter. So we spoke about gaining competitive advantage through information systems. Oh, very important, gave some examples. We discussed Porter's competitive forces model to better understand profitability within an industry and to better understand business strategy. We spoke about the value chain model to better understand competitive advantage and how IS can contribute to realize competitive advantage. And we concluded by discussing Henderson and Van Ketterman's strategic alignment model to better link business strategy and IS strategy.